At this point in our discussion on operations management, you're probably wondering, what then are the best practices for a company's operations? Well, as we have emphasized throughout this boot camp, in today's fast-changing business environment, one of the secrets for success is to combine organizational and operational stability with the ability to adapt and change. And to use a metaphor or comparison for this type of capability, I would say that it's like being able to write equally well with your left and right hand. And that's called ambidextrous. But that ambidextrous capability is quite uncommon in people. In fact, only 1% of people can naturally do that. So if only 1% of people are ambidextrous, you can imagine how rare it is for a company to be able to combine operational stability with operational flexibility and speed, which we might call operational ambidextrous. To help us understand the importance of operations in business and to understand how we can be better at managing stability and change, now let's look at some hard research data and facts which can enlighten us on this subject. McKinsey and Company, who are one of the world's leading consulting companies, have been studying for the past decade management practices and their impact on organizational performance. And one of those long-term McKinsey studies is called the Health Index, or the Company Health Index. And that McKinsey Company Health Index research has involved more than 2 million people responding at over 1,000 companies worldwide. And they do this research on a regular basis. The categories of health which they're measuring at McKinsey fall into 6 different areas, but 3 of those 6 areas involve operational issues. They include innovation, coordination and control, and capability. And these are important organizational topics. And what McKinsey have concluded from the research is that companies who build in both stability and speed in their operations have a 70% better chance of being ranked in the top quartile of their index. In other words, by building in stability and speed in operations, a company can outperform all other companies. And what outperform means is that those companies financially outperform other companies by a considerable margin. Now, the McKinsey findings are also consistent with other research from important researchers on this topic. For example, Professor Rita Gunther McGrath at Columbia University in New York City has investigated more than 2,300 large U.S. companies over a 10-year period. And what Professor McGrath discovered was that only 10 of those more than 2,000 companies she studied increased their net income by a minimum of 5% annually during that 10-year period. And Professor McGrath's conclusion from that research was that those 10 companies who were performing high were both extremely stable, meaning they had some structure that remained the same for a long period of time, but when needed, they were also rapid innovators who could adjust and readjust their resources and operational capabilities very quickly. And this ability to be both stable and dynamic is often referred to as operational agility. So what can we conclude from these research findings is that operational agility is good for business. And operational agility means a company can have periods of stability, but when needed, they can adapt quickly and easily to new challenges and opportunities if and when they arise. Now, it's very interesting to look again at the McKinsey research because they identified 3 core capabilities in high-performing companies that allowed them to be agile. In other words, McKinsey identified the 3 critical capabilities that allow companies to be effective and stable and change at the same time. And you should know what these capabilities are because they'll help you in your career and your company. And those 3 capabilities identified by McKinsey were, number 1, organizational structure, because organizational structure influences how resources are distributed in a company. Number 2, governance, because governance determines how decisions are made in a company and who makes them. And number 3 was processes, because processes decide how things get done, but they also influence performance measurement and accountability. So these were the 3 areas. And to understand in more depth what these 3 capabilities really mean, let's say a few words about each of them. First, the first core capability was Agile Structure. McKinsey found that the most successful companies studied often had one primary structure, and that structure remained stable over time. But they also had a secondary structure, and in that secondary structure, as an example, work teams were formed rapidly whenever they were needed to deal with unexpected situations. Now you might be wondering why those high-performing companies had 2 structures, and that's a really good question. Well, the reason they had 2 structures is because those structures serve different purposes. The primary structure was critical because it created continuous stability in the organization. And when we have continuous stability, people understood who they regularly report to, etc., and who they frequently engage with and how they work. But when change is rapid, or when more dynamic solutions are needed, a secondary structure is deployed. And the most important thing about this solution to remember is that within high-performing companies, there's a primary structure, and that primary structure creates continuity and stability. And as you might remember from our discussions in the organization bootcamp session, people like stability and continuity. But now let's say a few words about governance. The second capability of high-performing companies in the McKinsey study was Agile Governance. And what Agile governance means is that within an organization, both stable and dynamic decision-making processes are used. So as an example of this, when a company experiences very different conditions from stable to rapid environmental change, the company must be able to quickly rotate individuals to rapidly form teams who are tasked with specific goals that are influenced by that change. And it's very important to remember that those team members' roles and responsibilities must be precisely defined and agreed beforehand. In other words, the rapid deployment of resources when needed, combined with clearly defined roles and responsibilities, is critical. But those deployed teams will only work together for a short time and eventually return to their more stable structural role or governance system. And that's agility. The third capability of high-performing companies identified by McKinsey was organizational processes. Agile processes mean that in addition to a company having rapidly forming teams and processes, the agile company must also have stable core processes which are excellent. And those stable processes should be as standardized as possible, but please remember this, those standardized processes must still be hard for competitors to copy. And another important point related to this is one of the unique elements of an agile organization is that the organization must also put in place business process owners. And by business process owners, we mean individuals who have the primary responsibility for continuously improving the processes. This is because continuous improvement in agile companies is critical. Continuous improvement and continuous improvement. In addition to business process owners, there's also one additional critical role to be played in agile organizations, and that is the integrator. The integrator in an agile organization is the person responsible for cross-functional collaboration, sales, marketing, production, supply chain, and that integrator is continuously trying to improve execution, performance, and management of tasks and programs across functions. The integrator is also responsible for targets and, more importantly, meeting key performance indicators, KPIs, and goals. So, we could say that high-performing agile companies are unique because they have developed three capabilities which help them to deal with both stability and change. And those capabilities are: 1, organizational structure, primary structure, secondary structure. That influences how resources are distributed effectively when needed on short notice. 2, governance, precisely defined roles, rapid forming teams, determining how they make decisions in different conditions during stability or uncertainty. And number 3, processes, process owners who have responsibility and continuously improve processes and who are responsible for cross-functional collaboration within the organization. Now, that was a lot to absorb, but before you move on to the next session, why don't you take the STAB Agility Quiz, which you will see at the bottom of your page that you're looking at, to determine how agile your organization might be today. That will help you understand your situation. Now, wow, again, in a short amount of time, we have discussed quite a lot of critical operational management issues. And so it's now time to draw 3 important conclusions from this session. Conclusion number 1, operations management involves a wide range of activities in the company, including supply chain, operations, production, logistics, quality, distribution of goods and services, etc. It's very diverse. Conclusion number 2, in today's dynamically and rapidly changing environments, agility is essential, but it's also important that some structures remain stable for a longer period of time. Agility means that when needed, a company structure can adapt quickly and easily to new challenges and opportunities if and when they arise. But after these challenges are solved, the organization can rapidly return to a more stable structure, stable governance, and stable processes. And finally, number 3, remember the waterfall and the lake we used as a metaphor at the beginning of the session. The waterfall represents the traditional operations management approach, and as we said, that approach is best suited to stable conditions because it's finely tuned and optimized. But the lake, on the other hand, represented a more agile operational philosophy, because on a lake we have much more freedom to maneuver and change our structure and governance and processes, and this flexibility during less stable conditions allows us to be more effective and more successful.